Today on the Digital Dojo, said slowly with jazz hands, it is we are still on our mandate and our mission of getting you unstuck in any and every way that we possibly can. And today, on the heels of last week, we are talking about grief, but a different kind of grief. So the theme of the day is the woman you set aside. So this is about the version of you that got shelved while you were raising kids and holding the careers together and keeping everybody else okay. We're talking about the kind of grief that a lot of women carry quietly for a long time. And it's not grief for a person, it's not grief for a relationship. It's grief for the self that you might have been or might still be, but that keeps getting deferred. It's the writer who stopped writing. It's the woman who slowly got moved to the bottom of the list again and again and again. And this isn't about regret, and it isn't about whether or not the choices were wrong. It's about what it means to grieve something that you choose again, actually, and how to start feeling your way back towards a self that's been waiting a really long time to be found. So, so that's today.
Yay. I gotta tell you, I know I'm just here for a moment, but I will share that, I grew up in 60s, 70s in the times with Archie Bunker shows, and holy crap, that was tough.
Mm,
you know? Women are bad drivers,
yep.
me. I mean, it was just non-stop. And they tried to do it in their way to support, but it was just so blah, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
He was blah.
Yeah. And it's this challenge
That was
of,
normal. What?
yeah,
That's the
Ew,
problem,
yeah.
right?
is it was normal, was
God.
normalized.
And and again, well, like for you, Nicole, like the way you talk about how you raised your kids is so phenomenal, and there is no regret there. And things like not everything can be the first priority. So what has to get deprioritized, and then what do you do over the grief over the things that you genuinely are grateful to have deprioritized?
Mm.
So that is the day, the evening.
Do you know, I remember getting a call. I know I'm still not here, I'm going away. But I remember getting a call. I was in Alberta at the time, married at the time, 18 at the time.
Wow.
So didn't know much better. Anyway, I get this call um, from the Alberta Medical Department. And they're, oh no, ma'am, we can't discuss this with you. We have to talk to your husband.
Mm,
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
mm.
I do you now. I didn't flow very easily with that, but that I mean, I've been watching a lot of blowbacks with the oh, what's the thing with the red and Gilead? What's that series?
Oh, I don't. Oh, the Margaret Atwood series?
Elizabeth Moss.
Oh, Elizabeth Moss. Oh,
Oh,
Oh
is that the
yeah,
new one that we
I don't
saw that you
know.
thought sounded like Margaret Atwood
I don't
or
know.
looked
I
like Margaret
I
Atwood?
want
Martin.
to like
Yes,
Margaret Atwood.
Martin. Yeah, that.
Yeah.
And a lot of it does go back to that. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah, it
so crazy. I went to a job interview once to, because I played guitar, right? And
Mm-hmm.
this
yep.
guy, 70s guy, stereotypical 70s,
Hmm.
right? The hair, the attitude, the misogyny, the everything. And he looked at me and goes, "What guy would want to learn guitar from a chick?"
Oh,
Yeah, and that was daily news back then.
yeah.
Hmm.
And that wasn't like 300 years ago. That was
No,
that was in the 20th century.
can you imagine,
Yeah, that's the
right?
scary part.
Yeah.
Uh, Anyway, I'll leave you to it. Have fun.
Thanks. Thanks for ushering us in.
Yes, as always.
Yay.
And I will start doing questions. So, let's see which question of the questions. I think this one, speaking of fun things that people we know have done. So this question was, I gave up a career in journalism to raise my kids and I don't regret it. I want to be really clear about that. But I also can't stop wondering who I would have been. Is it possible to hold both of those things at the same time
Yes.
without it meaning
I did it. Yes.
without it meaning that something is wrong?
The question is it possible is easy to answer, I think, because it definitely is, but is it encouraged? Is it supported? Is it
No.
recognized? Is it validated? I think those are the questions that really are the underpinning of any reasonable answer. And unfortunately, I'd say, and both of you tell me, but or anybody listening who's a woman, please tell me. Um, those other components I just identified, like the validation, the respect, the recognition, the encouragement, those are the places where women are traditionally and typically underserved. And I think for uh, the natural and powerful instincts of maternity and all the beautiful things that feminine energy genuinely and it's looked at to provide, there's not a lot of support for women to integrate their whole self. So you end up, at least from my limited and humble perspective, getting truncated on either side of that, right? Like you get chastised if you don't, and this is on a cultural and societal level, if you don't pursue the things that, traditional femininity says you should pursue, and you do want to do your own thing, and you do want to go your own way, and you do have aspirations for you as a person, you get chastised for that. But then when you embrace, let's just call it for simple sake of conversation, the maternal side and instinct, and do things like give up dreams and hopes to facilitate family and children, you're not even really necessarily getting validated, respected, and encouraged or lauded for that. There's a lot of, well, that's just kind of what you're supposed to do. So that's a pretty tough corner to get painted into. And perhaps the first thing I can think of is to give yourself, as a woman, as a human, as a person, permission to be your full self. Be the full self that's allowed to uh, recognize the value and joy and hard work you've put into raising a family, but also be your whole self that's allowed to say, right, in order to do that, I had to sacrifice a lot. And I use the word sacrifice very deliberately because a sacrifice is something that you do out of love. It's an act of giving that starts with the idea that you'll never get back what you gave, never get back what you gave up. So, in the recognition of those things being possibly true, I would encourage you to give yourself back those things by giving yourself permission to say, yeah, I can be both. I can be proud and strong and wonderfully excited about my children and having been a mother and having raised my family, but I can also be hurt, upset, grieving, maybe even resentful about the parts of myself that I had to give up that weren't actually necessary for me to give up, other than for the cultural constructs that tells me that I can't be both.
That's a good answer. I like that one.
Do my best.
I also wonder about this idea of who people would have been. There is this feeling of trying to get something back that you can never get back, which might be a true story and might not be a true story because it's never the thing that we want, it's the feeling of the thing. right? We've talked about this before. If three people say they want a, I was going to name a fancy car. I don't know. What's a fancy car?
Ferrari.
Ferrari. Is that Italian?
Yes.
Woohoo. I'm one for one. Um, if three people say they want a Ferrari, they will all tell you, oh, I want a Ferrari. I need a Ferrari. It's really important that I have a Ferrari. It's about the Ferrari, but it isn't. For person number one, it's about proving that they've made it. They've made the money. They are where they were supposed to be. With another person, it's showing the family that they're able to follow in the family tradition of getting a good Italian X, Y, and Z because that's what their family roots are. And for the next person, it's no, it's the I've looked at the safety records and this is the balance for me of indulging myself in something that I want, which I really want to be able to do, and making sure I stay safe. It's never about the Ferrari. So it's also never about the things that we left behind, I think. It's what are the feelings about them? And how do I give myself the space to get that back now?
Yeah, maybe it's not just about getting something back. Maybe it's about also looking forward, right? And it's easier to look forward when you can allow yourself to reconcile what's occurred and what's in the past. And sometimes, this is where I think it relates to grief. I don't think, and again, happy to hear from all the ladies who are listening right now in terms of perspective, because it is just that, my perspective from a man's point of view. But I don't feel like women have been given the permission and the space to grieve those things. A lot of the rhetoric is, well, but look at the beautiful family you've got. No, gosh, you should be so proud of your kids. And that statement almost makes it feel like it's an either or, it's a binary, like you have to choose one or the other. Like you know, because you've raised wonderful children and put good adult humans into the world by giving them what they needed as kids at your own expense, it doesn't mean that you have to pick either being proud of that or them and yourself for having done so and still not be uh, grieving over things that you've given up in order to do that. So looking forward is an idea that I want to keep offering and encouraging, because to get something back, quote unquote, that you've lost is fundamentally impossible, right? In the sense that, think of it as an item. Even if you lose an item that's precious to you and you then get it back at some future point, it doesn't negate the fact that you have been grieving the whole time that you were disconnected from the thing. So being future forward, looking to the future by giving yourself permission to grieve, actually accept and land in what's been lost and the impact it's had on you that's been lost, I think sets us up to be in the best position to move forward. And because life is forward, it's always moving forward to create, a new set of conditions that maybe aren't exactly the same as to what you lost, but on the heels of what you were saying, Carl, about, the feeling of the thing as opposed to the thing itself. Uh, that's maybe a practical way to start getting back on track, getting back on track to acknowledge and be your entire whole self instead of trying to pretend that, what hurt didn't hurt.
I'm going to say yes, an excellent point. And there's one of the other emails says, I keep having this recurring fantasy about going back to school for something completely different from my life right now. I'm 51. Is that grief? Is that just midlife crisis stuff? I don't even know what to call it. So if we factor that in, because of course none of this is simple. I mean, as much as Instagram wants to make it like, here, look at this poster and you'll be cured in one to three sentences. It's always more complex than that. And there's going to be pieces of anything that resonate more with some people than others. So it's finding the way in for yourself. And that idea of a midlife crisis, I actually find really fascinating because I think we've been all taught to either fear or mock it. The idea of a midlife crisis with the guy who buys the sports car and ditches his entire perfectly wonderful life and blows it up for no reason. that's what we tend to think of as a midlife crisis, is sort of at best, and at worst it's the thing where we go, oh my God, what have I done with my life? I haven't done anything. And I think there's a chance in here for it to be more like a midlife metamorphosis. And I keep thinking about this idea of a sea change, which now is used for politics and a whole bunch of things, which it just sort of means a big change. But it's from Shakespeare, and it's this idea that um, when somebody thinks they've lost someone, and Ariel, I believe, Ariel's response is nothing of him fades. He's just suffered a sea change into something rich and strange. And this idea that a sea change transforms us so much from what we thought we were and what we were aiming towards into something else that we don't even know what we think about it yet. So I think some of this can be about reaching for what we are deciding to evolve into now that we've done the thing, because we know so many women who, like, you, when they talk about their kids, you just hear that was and is their thing. They will never regret that. That is so much a huge part of what they believe they were here to do, and they've created these amazing humans. And they don't necessarily know how to take all of that knowledge and wisdom and information and skill set and use it to evolve into something rich and strange. And they don't even know if they have the right to.
Mm, fair, or the time in terms of the stage of life that they're in. Uh,
Yeah, I'm tired of that, man. I'm tired of the oh well, you're old now,
yeah, well, and
especially for women.
yeah, and there is a different um, cultural clock around that for women, I believe, very firmly, right? That's certainly kind of
It's a dumb cultural clock.
exaggeratedly related to and um, hyperbolized by the biological clock, quote unquote, in terms of a woman's value. And interestingly enough, I hope this will make sense to everyone, but from that standpoint of a midlife crisis, a lot of the work that I do with men um, consistently hinges around those kinds of actions, right? The oh, I'm in my midlife now. I'm middle aged, and there's I think a point of awareness that people come to, and men handle it in many ways, sometimes very poorly, on behalf of my gender, but no excuses, because part of the reason why they handle it very poorly is because they feel like, oh well, I'm now at this place where I've got no more shallow victories, no more hollow victories to look forward to
Mhm.
like I had in my youth. And part of that comes from that awareness, comes from the fact that, like, you get to a certain age and you start realizing that winning or losing aren't the be all and end all, because by the time, if you've participated in life with any kind of initiative, you'll realize, hey, I'm going to win sometimes, I'm going to lose sometimes, and they just become part of the natural cycle, right? Whereas when you're younger, a victory of winning and feeling like you're on top feels like it fills and fuels your whole life and your whole being. And then, conversely, a loss in our tender, formative years, all the way up into young adulthood, can feel so devastating, like you'll never get over it, like you broke up with this person and you'll never survive and love anybody again. But then you realize that life continues to move forward and keeps going. So I've experienced that so much in my work with people in general, but with men specifically in this way, that I've coined a term that I to describe quote unquote what people call as a midlife crisis, and I call it the second adolescence. So we run into a second adolescence, I feel like, and I say it that way because it mirrors and mimics a lot of what happens in our teenage years, right? Where
Sorry, is this everyone or men? I'm just asking.
I think everyone, I'm trying to speak to how I think men handle it really poorly,
Okay.
and the impact and ramifications of that on women, and women as wives, women as mothers, and their families. and almost my attempt is to kind of inform everybody about that, but to share that insight from a man's perspective with women, because in that dynamic, I feel like a lot of men justify a lot of very immature behavior and do so by blaming it on their partner. So this is where this whole perfect storm of invalidation hits, because many women end up in the position where they've done all the things that they feel like they're supposed to do. Right? They've worked hard in all the areas of family and motherhood. They've also, especially in modern society, had jobs and been money earners as well. So they get to this place now where the nest gets empty. The kids are moving on to the other phases of their lives. They expect that their partner is going to stand strong, be stable, grow with them into this new unknown territory that's called, I'm grieving over now being displaced from the identity I was told I had to have. And then the men decide that, oh, well, you know what, that Ferrari looks better than you, and so does my secretary or a personal assistant. I'm leaving. I want a divorce. Okay. Then instead of a woman having a chance to really flourish into this whole new kind of wisdom that she's gained from family and motherhood and putting family first, that she could use to like really inform and fuel her desire to write or to paint or to build her own business or do whatever that she wants to do, she's now all of a sudden dealing with the destabilization of the family because her husband or her partner have gone through their second adolescence and handled this one worse than they handled the original one that they went through when they were really teenagers. Okay, so there's a dynamic there that I hope, by understanding a bit more of, that women can gain some fortification and encouragement and realize that you know that whole phenomenon, where really what men are trying to do at that age is recapture some spark and excitement and vigor of their youthfulness, is available to them in way better ways if they take some of their life experience and stay a grown up uh, with their partner and for themselves in their lives, that don't involve drastic divorces and affairs and all kinds of crazy purchases like brand new sports cars and return to nightclubs where the age of the people that you're pursuing are the same as your children. Like that's part of where that second adolescence um, is an impactful thing to be aware of, and being able to move through that phase with some mindfulness and some awareness and some maturity and that you've earned from the experience of life to get to quote unquote middle age and get to that midlife crisis can be the place where so many things can open up and flourish and reflourish in brand new ways. So I guess maybe my simplest distilled message from all of that is um, boys are dumb a lot of times, and uh, don't fall for it, ladies.
Okay, so that leads us into, I'm going to read two email snippets back to back, because I do feel like this is a year. I remember reading, we were talking about this earlier in Western astrology and Eastern astrology. They're talking about this year as a year of social and spiritual evolution. And I've been watching that with people coming in, and it's just whether or not you embrace the fact that it's time to evolve or not. And so these are two of the pushback emails that I had emailed. Um, the first one I had emailed a woman I was thinking of, and it's a shared email, so her and her husband both read it. And the second one is about somebody's mom. So the first one says, honestly, I'm a little skeptical of this whole framing. Women have always had to make sacrifices. Men do too. Why are we treating this like it's a crisis? I'm genuinely asking, not trying to be dismissive. And then the second one says, I tried talking to my mom about this, and she looked at me like I had two heads. She raised 5 kids and said she never once felt this way. Is this a generational thing?
Hmm.
So when we're looking at the pushback of why are you making such a big deal of it? I think that points to your point
Mm.
of 1 minute ago. And also, I feel like this is part of the whole emotional shutdown thing that we keep referencing in here, that somehow emotions are bad. And why are we feeling emotions? So I do think it's a generational thing, because I remember a story about one of my grandmothers when she found out something really terrible had happened, and that she was now going to be responsible for the family in a way that she should not have had to have been at the very young age she was. And she gave herself permission. She went into the bathroom, closed the door, locked it, and cried for 10 minutes, and then wiped her eyes, came out, and basically that was it. She just keep calm and carry on, right? That's what you do. And when you're in fight or flight mode, which is so many of our ancestors, there was so many of our ancestors were in that, and ancestors, grandparents were in that state. That impression was that feeling emotions is the thing that's going to do you in, not the thing that's going to move you forward. And I do think that we are becoming aware as a society in a whole, as a whole, that that's not true. Whether or not it was true, like, yes, in the heat of it, in the, to borrow from Dana's terms, in the heat of the battle, you can't necessarily be sitting there going, oh my goodness, I'm just so upset that this person's fighting with me. But more often than not, when you give yourself permission to feel the emotions and understand what they're telling you, that's the thing that not only leads you to safety, but keeps you going into a state where you can actually do better and better. I think that's part of it. And I think the other part of it is, with the women make sacrifices, men do too. So what's the big deal? It goes back to, please don't start to feel your emotions and question what that means and how you're going to change, because then I'm going to be forced to do that for myself as well. And I think with a lot of men who were trained into not having emotions, which was a terrible thing to train into men, and I feel very bad for men having had to embrace that. That's terrifying. That's beyond terrifying, because it's not only is it quote unquote not manly for that generation that was taught that sort of thing, but it's such unknown territory, and people feel like they're walking out on the ice without, not only without skates or a hockey stick or how to do a triple lutz, but without shoes.
Mm.
And they're just going to go through the ice. I'm mixing my ice metaphors, but so I think this is all about, really, it would it would serve us all to be aware of the usefulness of emotions.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, I think our emotions are a crucial part of our internal compass. I think our emotions are an integral part of our intuitive powers. And I think that, without a solid compass, we're lost, literally. And the idea of facing something that's unknown is beyond terrifying, because if you're already feeling disoriented in a place that's supposed to be familiar, and you know the lay of the land of moving into something brand new is abject terror. And that, I think, has a profound effect on, a component of, I think, human nature that is supposed to be a gift to us, and that's the idea of discovery and rediscovery. And without having any support or being encouraged and ushered into the right kind of framework where discovery and rediscovery are not only allowed and permissible, but are also encouraged and supported, we get all these incredible breakdowns, right? We get all these places where people feel that things have been unfair and unjust. And what do I mean by that? They land in a position where they're like, but I've done everything I'm supposed to do. I tried to show up in all the ways I was supposed to show up. I did my best to do that. And now I feel not only, unrewarded, unrecognized, and invalidated, but now I'm totally lost because I'm expected to just step into a brand new framework that nobody ever taught me about or how to embrace. And unfortunately, it feels to me, and I'd love ever to hear everybody else's opinion as well too, but unfortunately, it feels to me like that's been skewed most unfairly and most consistently and emphatically against women in many, many, many ways. So it's kind of, you know, insult to injury by the time a woman has, quote unquote, done all the things that she feels that she was supposed to do and has been taught to do, done them with all her heart, and then is in a position now where she's kind of left on her own to pick up the pieces and take care of herself. And not only is that the case, but most women are also taught that, but you can only take care of yourself in these specific limited ways, which we've also taught you are acceptable somewhat and reasonable in our eyes. So again, there's a lot of determination by other in that space where really what we're talking about is the value of being self-determined, the value of being able to choose for oneself at all times. Um, it's hilarious, literally the word heretic, and I can tell you why this is coming to mind, but the word heretic, which has had such powerful, and negative connotations since its inception into the English language, the derivation of it from the Latin actually simply means one who chooses.
Mhm.
So you're a heretic if you think that you can choose things for yourself. So, let's put that into our Magna Carta and look at the influence of Western culture and how powerfully that message gets hammered into uh, women as something that you're not allowed to do. Really, not allowed to choose for yourself, not allowed to make choices about your body, not allowed to make choices about, your role, about your passions, about your vocation, about the things you want to do. So many women who have done that pay a heavy price for it. And there's kind of a no-win sort of feeling that requires a lot of, pure courage, strength, and defiance to navigate and manage on a daily basis, which I think leaves a lot of women feeling like no matter how successful, quote unquote, they've been by any metrics or what they've accomplished, that things have been unfair.
So I'm going to read two snippets again back to back because I feel like they work together really well. And when we look at that idea of choice, and when we look at the idea that we have not been taught to give ourselves the space to move forward, to choose what works for us. Um, that's okay. I did. Um, Snippet number one. My kids are thriving. My marriage is solid. My life looks really good from the outside. So why do I feel like I'm in mourning? And snippet number two, I keep starting things, a pottery class, a writing group, a garden, and then losing interest after a few weeks. I don't know if I'm not finding the right thing or if I'm afraid to find it. So I have thoughts, and then I want to see what you think because I always want to know what you think. And my short thought for the first one is grocery bag syndrome.
Mm.
And I think so much of this for women is grocery bag syndrome. And grocery bag syndrome, for those of you who don't remember the days, folks, when everyone had plastic bags at the grocery store, you would go to the store, you would get plastic bags, and you would carry them home and you would ferry them inside. And normal, sane human people would take a couple of them in at a time. And I would walk from the store or I would carry them in from the car because I like doing things quickly all at once. So I would have, you know, 2,000 pounds of groceries in plastic bags cutting into my fingers. And mostly as you get towards the door and get towards the kitchen, you're just going, ow, 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 ow. And then, but you can do it. You can do it because you have to do it because you have to get the groceries inside. And then once you put them down and you peel the bags off of your fingers and then you peel your fingers open, that's when it starts to hurt. That's when the blood starts coming back in and it starts to throb. So grocery bag syndrome says, I'm mourning now because I haven't had the time to mourn before now. So we tend to feel because we're feeling an emotion, it must be wrong or we must be wrong, as opposed to now I have the space finally to feel the things I didn't have the space to feel before.
Mm.
And whether that's because of kids or because of a career or because of what have you, there's I think there's a beauty to allowing yourself to feel those emotions without having to explain them away and without having to assign them to something specific in the present time. Because whether it's grocery bag syndrome or whether it's inherited trauma, I am starting to think, honest to Pete, that 97.9% of what we're feeling in any moment is really not about the moment. And I might raise that number.
Hmm.
So that is thing one, which I'm curious. And thing two, starting things and not finishing them, and I'm not sure if I'm finding the right thing or if I'm afraid to find it, I do think ties into this as well, because if we are taught that we have to get through things and move forward and succeed, then if everything's ascribed to a time in our life, then the time to learn whether or not you want to do pottery or learn how to be a writer, that's sort of from age 0 to, if we're being generous, 20 something. That's not later. That's nice. That's a hobby, but you're not really supposed to indulge that. You're not supposed to see what that sparks in you and what you feel. You're supposed to be doing what's appropriate at your time of life. And really, for women, there's not a lot of historical context for how valuable you can be past 40, certainly past 50. Men get to do the silver fox thing because they're gonna run the dynasty. I don't know, whatever that is, which I think is unfair to men too, by the way. But with women, it's sort of, well, you've done your thing. You've had kids, you've helped people, you've worked on the farm, you've had your career, whatever it is. And now we don't have roles for women anymore over 40 or 50. I think we're just starting to build them in now.
Yeah, I think culturally and more anciently, roles for women were much clearer and of much greater value. I think they've been truncated by the idea of, like very simply, like women as objects of beauty and attraction, and women as childbearers. Both of those have been attached to, very unreasonably in many ways, to the biological realities that then make the cutoff very, very simple, unfortunately, and very, very damaging, unfortunately, as well too. Um, this all of this conversation is reminding me of a course I took when I was in school in educational psychology that introduced me to this idea that, by around the age of 3, that's one of the first major
Mm.
points of what's called individuation, where a child starts to realize that they are a distinct individual and separate person from others around them and other things. Right? And it sort of mirrors like brain wave changes, and kind of how we build sensory perception and neural pathways being built. It's like, oh, I kind of realize like I'm a separate thing from mom, from dad, from brother, from sister, from dog, from chair, from bird outside. And the whole psychology, the whole philosophy behind this potential, educational psychology belief was that by the time we're about 3 years old, we have a pretty good sense of what we're here to do. Not necessarily how we're going to do it, but if children are being watched and paid attention to very closely, they'll just start to display the things that they're most excited about, that they're most naturally of their own choice, left to their own devices, drawn to and excited by. And that those things are indicators of, what a child's predispositions are, what their talents are, what their abilities are, what they are excited about, what lights them up in life. And the idea was is that that would be, a great thing to pay attention to and foundationally start to build upon, not with force or pressure, but with attention, to be aware. These kids are starting to flourish in this direction when they do these activities, or this is what they're most excited about and what they talk about the most. And, take that natural, innocent spark and the beauty of passion and life that's there in that, child's energy, truncate it and start to slap roles on top of it as to, what quote unquote boys should do and what quote unquote girls should do. And it started to make a lot of sense to me even back then. And I touch on it, when I was in school I touched on it, but the idea has grown even more so as I've just lived and gotten older and watched life progress. That denying a child that self-determined permission at that age is a really easy way to layer in whatever kinds of roles, gender wise, culturally, and societally, that we want to on top of their natural tendencies. So you put a child who's really excited, a young girl who's really excited about toy trucks and digging in the dirt and the sand and gets excited building sandcastles, and start telling her that, well, you can only wear dresses. They have to be like this. They have to be this color. No, you can't wear those. This is what we expect of you. This is what you're supposed to do if you want to grow up and be a respectable woman. Start layering that in with, mothering and nurturing and family and look pretty and don't be difficult, be agreeable, all of those things. It's no wonder that two things happen when women get into a place where it's their turn to then start to educate a generation below them of their own children. They, on some level, push against what they were taught, but fundamentally, they also reteach what they were taught, do all of that, get to a place where they've done that job successfully, and then are totally lost because they've been disconnected from the thing that made them come alive the most at the earliest point in their lives. So no wonder there's intense grief there. And if grief is kind of the entrance point to our discussion for today, I think understanding where the source of the grief and the depth of the grief actually comes from. It isn't just about, well, I was a woman who made a choice to become a mother and raise a family. It's, well, I was a little girl who was excited about a whole bunch of stuff that I never got to explore fully. Right. So then to land in a position where we're trying to, soothe or validate a woman who's now, feeling that grief of, oh man, all that time lost of the woman I could have become, and to not address that pattern that started even before she was a woman. No wonder it's like saying to a person, well, I know you're thirsty, but I'm going to give you the most delicious cookies I can, and you should just be happy with those because at least I'm giving you something. But we never touch on the need that she really has. We never give her something to quench and soothe that parched thirst. So I think we have to look at the whole cycle really fulsomely, and maybe if we do that, then we can actually start to soothe and remedy the right thing, not just the result of the thing.
So one of the other emails, I'll just pull out one line, says, how do you grieve something that never actually existed? So what you're saying is, in part, we're grieving it because it never actually existed and it had a chance to and didn't.
Yeah, that's a deeper level of grief, right? Because that's an entire loss of potential, and potential is where all possibility lies, and that's a real thing. And that's, I think, part of what makes people feel like they have to justify, explain, and litigate their emotions, right? Whereas really, I think the healthiest approach that we can take is, you're allowed to feel what you feel. You're going to feel whatever you feel. And there doesn't have to be explanation or quote unquote logic to it for it to be justified and valid to you. That creates space where we can help people understand that what they feel is important. It's part of their emotional and intuitive guidance system. And what they do with their feelings becomes the issue more so than whether or not they're allowed to feel whatever they feel.
Okay, but is there crossover? And I'm making this entire thing up as I speak, so I reserve the right to change my mind.
Yeah, so we're doing the same thing.
So I don't know if we've talked on here before, but we talk all the time about how uh, we have an unlimited number of emotions and shades of emotions, but a very limited number of physical sensations to tell us what emotion we're feeling. So most of us know we're sad when we feel our head is heavy, or when we feel our throat is tightening and we're going to cry. We feel like we're angry because we feel the pressure in our head start to build, or our cheeks start to flush, or our hands start to tighten. And one of the things we talk about quite often is the crossover between the physical sensations for anxiety and the physical sensations and like anxiety, nervousness, and the physical sensations for excitement. So for both of them, we tend to feel jittery, we tend to feel butterflies in our stomach, we tend to feel like we're antsy and we don't know, like we're waiting for the thing to start, we're dreading
Mhm.
the thing to start. And more often than not, when people give themselves a chance to feel into that, it's often both, but it's usually, I don't know, 95 excitement, 5% nervousness and anxiety. There's much more of that. Let yourself feel into the quote unquote negative aspect and use that to power the
Mhm.
positive aspect. And Chinese medicine is all about the same thing, right? So the liver qi, when the liver qi is the strongest energy in the body and it's in charge of stress, frustration, anger, depression. And when the liver chi is doing its thing and moving freely, it's in charge of passion and all kinds of passion, being passionate about getting up in the morning and passionate about what you're doing. So that was a very long prologue to say, what if some of the grief around this, grieving the thing that never existed, grieving the person that you were never able to be, is there not a chance that some of that grief is building up the energy for something else?
I'd say there's more than a chance for that. That's a really insightful takeaway because it's full of acceptance, right? It's full of recognition that all things have purpose. And it's harkening back again, good old glory days of university. The idea that, and it was so cool to look at these ideas in terms of education, right? Which is, a bunch of courses that I took on educational psychology. How do people learn? Um, and how are people conditioned, really? That really, and again, we can, we're putting it into simple language so we can discuss it. But emotions are, the idea is that they're most attached to our instinct. Okay, so really, if we say that, as opposed to feelings, which are attached to our intuition, let's say. So if emotions are attached to our instinct, really we can, as far as the basic common denominator, we really only have as human beings like two emotions: love and fear. Right? Love, pleasure, and pain. The things that are loving draw us forward. Things that are scary and painful make us retreat. So our feelings are just individual, unique, perceptual shadings of those two basic emotions. So that idea of, grief, and like we touched on last week, and I think is great. I mean, I'm nerding out here. I love this topic because, grief in that context could have a whole different kind of purpose, kind of like you just described, called that our grief is showing up with purpose. Our grief is amassing an energy that we can utilize to move forward, that we can use to help us discern our next best action of survival, our next best action of growth, our next best action of expansion. So to deny our grief leaves us really, really, really truncated and handicapped in our ability to navigate. So, this whole idea of reframing grief's value as information and as a process to be leaned into with acceptance as opposed to being one that we shut down and hide away from, I think translates really perfectly into the very, specific aspect of the topic we started with tonight, which is, hey, if women after empty, the nest is empty and their identity has been, fundamentally, not to be too dramatic, but shattered because they're no longer needed in that specific role to the urgency and intensity that they were for such a long time, to the point where they've completely forgot themselves. If we can give them space to grieve all of that without judgment and ridicule of, oh, well, you should be happy, you should be grateful, you should be satisfied. The women, I think, that can emerge from a space where they're supported like that are exactly the kind of women that used to be highly valued after their childbearing years and child rearing and raising years have come to an end, because a woman that emerges from that and navigates that space into that unknown is going to be full of tremendous amounts of wisdom, tremendous amounts of courage, and like invaluable things to offer.
And part of where I think that ties in is when we look at grief in Chinese medicine. So every organ system has emotions and tastes, by the way. One of the ways you know that you're in grief mode is not only the feelings, it's the taste. So if you tend to have an acrid taste or a pungent taste or a metal taste in your mouth, then there's grief going on. But when we look at the flip side of that, when we allow ourselves to work through perfectionism, which is one of the things, going back to the email about um, the person who was saying, I do a little bit of this, I do a little bit of that, and I keep moving on and I don't know why. So when we are in balance, the lungs are in charge of courage, integrity, dignity, and high self-esteem.
Hmm.
It's moving forward with courage, it's moving forward with clarity and openness and connection. So part of what I think this comes down to for so many women is, yes, you have not had this charted for you because you've gone past your prescribed, sell by date, and you've done all the things you're supposed to do. But I think what we're getting back to, and I want to go on a tear about matrilineal societies, but I'm not going to because we have 0 minutes left
Next week.
next week, is you get to move into a place where you take all the wisdom and knowledge and use it for determination and clarity and courage and moving forward in a way that very few people can, because of all the experiences you've had and how well you've juggled them to get to this point in life. So feel the grief,
Yeah,
use it to move forward into what you're allowed to turn into.
absolutely. And that's the part, that's part of the process that doesn't get acknowledged, never mind encouraged.
Which part? All of it?
Taking the grief, accepting it, and turning it into powerful information and energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, that is our time
I believe it is.
for the day.
I've got all kinds of things I want to talk about with motherhood for next week.
Okay, we have a plan for next week. If you've been listening to this and you want us to talk about something next week, you can email yourdigitaldojo@gmail.com, or you can go to thedigitaldojo.net, and there's a link on there where you can reach out to us. That's also where you can find all of our things that you can do with us. More coming soon. Our shameless self-promotion is going to be the same because we're so close to getting new audios up there, so close. And then, speaking of perfectionism, I might have gone back in and had to rewrite a few of the nights because they just weren't quite enough. And I didn't want to go back to my old system of a 21 night set of audios becoming a 40 night set of audios because I just kept adding stuff. So, there's stuff on there that you can go and play with now. There's a ton of blog posts on there, and we're just excited to see you reach out to us and let us know what you want to hear about next week.
All of that can be done and found and experienced at the digitaldojo.net, where we are offering a 50% discount to all News for the Soul listeners on anything that we've got up there for purchase. And also want to remind you that there's a ton of free stuff and a way to access any one of these kinds of conversations by listening to the archived News for the Soul episodes, and also checking us out on our socials, from Pinterest, Reddit, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, to any of the other ones that are out there that I think we're on that I can't remember if I forgot some.
Oh,
Nice to have you.
and speaking of, when you go to thedigitaldojo.net, if you are listening to the audios, there's a white belt mind on there, by the way. If you really like the way Dana's brain percolates along, you can do the white belt mind and get some information on what that's like. And on the audio page, you can do 3 free nights for 3 different sets of audios, but you can also vote for the next set of audios. So as soon as this current set is done, we're going to be building out the next set. So please go try out the 3 free nights for 3 different ones and let us know. Even if you don't try them out, let us know what you think we could build out next, because we are narrowing it down to 700 or less. But within the next 3 to 6 days, we will be starting the build out and the research for the next set. So go vote. We'd love to hear from you. And voting's always good. Woo!
Woo, go voting.
Okay. Feel free to continue to be awesome out there. You can feel free to be awesome too. And that's it.
Thanks again, as always, everyone.